Struggling to make your private practice more profitable? The Profit First Academy by Green Oak Accounting is designed just for therapists, helping you boost profits, pay yourself confidently, and take control of your finances.
Join today for just $54 a month at profitfirstfortherapists.com/academy.
Feeling overwhelmed as a leader or helping professional in these chaotic times? You're not alone. Finding clarity and mentorship can be the key to avoiding burnout and stepping into your role as a leader. Our very own Katie Vernoy is offering dedicated strategy sessions to help you navigate these challenges.
Visit evolvetothriveconsulting.com/modern therapist to learn more.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt Widhelm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our profession, the things that go on in our world. And earlier this year, Katie and I had talked about we are going to be making more efforts to provide more resources outside of our regularly scheduled content. And in a changing political world for therapists who need to know more stuff, maybe even venturing into our name here a little bit about survival guide sorts of things. And we wanted to bring some of our friends, our experts, people that we know, and from the world of Katie's background, we actually are very fortunate to be joined today by Andrew Strait. He's an immigration attorney and has done some work on the other side of the government things before, and being able to help us learn more about what therapists should know about immigration and a little bit of history about it, where things are now, and what we should know. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We are so excited for this conversation. And thank you, Andy, for coming. I know that this is me calling on a favor from high school. So I'm so excited that you're willing to join us. But before we jump into our conversation, I'll ask you the question that we ask all of our guests, which is, who are you and what are you putting out into the world?
Well, one, I am a missing California is what I'm missing. I am a California transplant now living in the Washington, D.C. area. And I am surviving former government service. So I am a former public servant, which seems to be a traumatizing experience in and of itself these days. And I served almost 20 years in federal law enforcement and worked for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And I was the public advocate for migrants under the Obama White House. And I served there, and I was in charge of the immigration custody system, and then served with the Biden transition team and the Biden campaign as a Homeland Security advisor, and then worked in the nonprofit space, worked for the Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service. And over this last border crisis, I stood up the unaccompanied children's centers on the border, as well as family centers on the hotels. And right now, I own and operate a migrant law center here in Maryland, and we actually have an office in Los Angeles where my brother practices. And so I'm putting out in the world help for migrant families and children.
So just to clarify, you worked for ICE, but you were one of the good people who was actually doing what the law said that migrants should be doing and helping facilitate people at that.
I don't know if you can see it, but there's an ICE badge behind me. That is my farewell plaque. And I'm the only child welfare lawyer to be in the ICE executive service. I was the nice guy from ICE.
I love that.
However, I was defunded by an act of Congress. As the public advocate, I was meant to give migrants going through immigration enforcement proceedings a voice at the table. And Republicans thought that was a useless taxpayer expense. And that really this started in 2012, 2013. And that is when this whole immigration's always been a lightning rod, and we'll get into that, I think, in this podcast. But that's when it really started getting very vitriolic. And that is during the Obama administration, when you try to pursue comprehensive immigration reform. That's when my position was quickly abolished. I stayed at ICE, but that position that was tried to be reach across the aisle and bring in the ability to be humane in our enforcement practices. Unfortunately, that was a collateral damage position. But I still remained at the agency, and we tried to soften the way we did things. Obama did go down as the number one person who arrested more migrants, who detained more and deported more. But he did so with due process and the rule of law. And that's something we're missing right now.
So to step back a little bit, one of the questions that we start with is often, what are therapists getting wrong? I don't know that we have an equivalent, but high level, before we get into the details, what do therapists really need to know about immigration right now?
Well, I think therapists, I deal actually a lot with therapists in my practice because in my asylum cases, I often have to call upon therapists to give testimony and expert opinion in these asylum cases. They actually have to give advice and an expert analysis and reports about what the trauma they experienced in their country of origin, especially if they've been a victim of a crime or they've been a victim of torture or abuse. But in general, it's more basic than that. Right now, what people need to be aware of is there's just a culture of premeditated fear that this current administration is putting out there and has been putting out there since the current president has been running for office ever since he came down in a golden escalator in 2016. And what you'll hear from me is this arc of a person seeking high office and attaining high office by fear mongering or seeking to cast aside and fear of the other is actually not a new theme in world politics. You've seen this time and time again. Fear of the other, the newcomer taking your job, someone else being in charge of your economic downfall. That happens all the time. And it just so happened that it coincided with, some economic crisis in the United States. And so, right now there's just a huge uneasiness, both in the migrant community and the American citizenry, that I think therapists are tapping into. And whether or not you're a therapist dealing with a migrant or a refugee who is a newcomer and doesn't know if they're going to be arrested, doesn't know if they should send their kid to school, or if they're dealing with someone who is just, watching the news and thinking, what's going on in the world? Therapists have to deal with the fact that we live in a 24-hour news cycle, whether or not they're seeing immigration news and thinking, oh my gosh, is that a migrant going to cause me harm? Or is it the migrant thinking I'm going to be arrested? And therapists are there to ease those issues, and they kind of need to know the truth. And it's hard to find the truth these days.
Private practice owners, do you feel like you're working hard but not seeing the profits you deserve? The Profit First Academy by Green Oak Accounting is here to change that. Designed exclusively for therapists, this program is built on the proven Profit First framework to help you take control of your finances and grow your business sustainably.
With step-by-step coaching, live Q&As with Profit First expert Julie Harris, and direct access to accountants who specialize in private practice, you'll get everything you need to build a profitable, thriving practice. And the best part? It's just $54 a month with no long-term commitment. Sign up today at profitfirstfortherapists.com/academy. So some of the truth depends on who you talk to. So as you're kind of already outlining here, I think for many of us millennials, the first example that we were given as far as this exists is 9/11 and kind of the post 9/11 response to particularly people from the Middle East and the Arab world. I'm sure in people who have gotten more than basic public education around the history, you can go back and look at various groups throughout the history of whether it be Mexicans, whether it be Chinese, whether it be Irish, anybody else. This is part of being American also, is very much just having some of the immigration aspects there. I'd like to jump this conversation to what I think is kind of in some of the zeitgeist here, which is talking about those who are here legally and those who are not here legally or undocumented, and really what ICE actually does in some of this work. Is ICE really chasing after everybody who just has the wrong skin tone?
Well, and to a certain extent, there is somewhat racial profiling in the sense that statistically, yes, there can be folks that are here illegally from countries of origin that have people who may be brown skin tone. But the vast majority of what ICE is doing right now is looking at people who have final orders of removal that they haven't gone after before. So these people have been ordered removed and they have a list and they're looking at final addresses that they know where they were, and they're knocking on doors and they're trying to see if they're home. And if they're there, they're picking them up. And if there's other people in the house or on the street, they're picking those people up. So let's just say they have, and each of these field offices, and there's 24 of them, have target quotas. And so they are trying to get these quotas and these targets. And for the first time in a long time, they're allowed to arrest people that are just here illegally without having a final order or out having a criminal conviction. And before, there was this prioritization. There was people that were here illegally but also committed a crime. There were people who illegally, and again, they didn't fail to report for their deportation order. And so with folks that were here illegally, yes, it was people who were predominantly from Central and South America. That's shifting, actually, though. For the first time 2 years ago, we have been non-majority, non-Central American and South American, meaning for the last 2 years, more folks have been coming from other places across the globe than Central and South America, China, India, other places. And that's because, and this is where you have to give, not say that the Trump administration some credit, but the southern border is a very porous place. And so that southern border, it's the largest landmass in the entire globe, really, that allows people to kind of cross it. And so it is important to protect it. And so people are using that southern land border to come across the United States. It is a very prosperous first world country, the most prosperous first world country, obviously, next to a country that obviously Mexico that can be frequented by people who want to go through it and transit it. And so it does have that push-pull factor that you've heard. And so there are a lot of people that are going through the border that can be from all across the globe, predominantly from Central and South America historically, but that's changing. And so traditionally, ICE has been focusing on the people that are from Central and South America, do have immigration violations, do have criminal histories. But right now, they're also targeting people that happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Is the border really not secure?
The border is secure. So what had happened in the Biden administration was unfortunately, a missed opportunity to fix something very, very broken. So for the first time in the nation's history during the Trump administration, thanks to the pandemic, the Trump administration closed the nation's border due to Title 42, a public health emergency. And that shut off the U.S. border to asylum seekers. Our asylum system is broken. When people come to this country and seek asylum protection, the vast majority will not actually get asylum granted to them. A lot of people think asylum is, I had a bad lot in my country, I don't have economic opportunity, I had criminal gangs or had violence. That could explain Baltimore. I mean, it's not necessarily what it is. In asylum law, you have to have a particularized social group and a state action. Venezuela is a good example of this. Nicolas Maduro is persecuting me. I protested against Nicolas Maduro. He threw my family in jail. It is not that I don't have access to opportunities in this rural village in Honduras, and I need to do this. So a lot of people, what happened after the border was completely closed for some time is there's this huge buildup of people wanting to cross the border. And so hundreds of thousands, millions actually crossed during the Biden administration. And they were so overwhelmed that they gave what was called notices to report. They just gave these pieces of paper. And they said, hey, go to ICE field offices and check in and get your charging documents, basically your court orders. And believe it or not, most people did because they thought they had access to asylum. But the system got overwhelmed and the politics took over, and Trump and the Republicans said, our border is out of control. People are pouring in. Well, they were pouring in. They lawfully did what the immigration authorities told them to do, but the system couldn't handle it. And when those people do end up going to court, and I represent a lot of them, if they have attorneys, about 50% may get asylum. If they don't have attorneys, statistically, 25 to 30% won't. But the vast majority will not. And guess what? There's over 1 million people in the immigration court system. There's over 10 million people not. Guess how many judges? 700.
Wow.
700. And Trump just fired about 30 of them. And so, when you have 700 judges for 1 million cases, you know how long it takes? People get citizen children. People get houses. People get jobs. And so when you go as an ICE officer and you go to effectuate that order of removal, you're breaking apart a fabric of American society. When these people go and report to communities, here's the other thing. This is something that is something that has been true since day one of our founding. And this is also the misnomer that is terrible politics. By and large, the immigration community has less criminal propensity than the US population by almost 75%. By the time they cross the border and within 10 days of getting to the city of destination, they have the job. They have within 30 days a tax ID number to pay taxes, and they're employed. And they're working in a job, they're paying taxes, and they're ingrained and doing good work. So they're not causing any harm. They're taking jobs that we need to be taken. They need to be done. So it is really an economic engine that we've always needed to have done. And if you look at the history of the country, what we've done, and this is, getting into kind of macro, is we formed the country in 1776 and there was all this land, and we brought over the Irish and the Scots and then the Germans, and we're like, oh, manifest destiny. Okay, you guys go out and plow the West. And they're like, oh gosh, it's really rugged out there. Chinese labor, you go do that. And then eventually Jim Crow, slavery, African Americans, and then immigrant labor. And immigrant labor has replaced it ever since, and it hasn't stopped. And the U.S. American economy can't let it stop. And everyone knows it. The business community knows it. The Republicans know it. And so it's just a point of how much do you need to do the fear-mongering to get elected versus how much do you need to do it to run an economy? And that's that push and pull we're doing right now.
I want to ask, you're talking about the immigration process and the asylum process for those who have attorneys have a much higher success rate. What is that process? How complicated is that?
Well, one of the things that is very sad to me is that the immigration process is a civil process for which there's no right to counsel. So unlike the process for criminal proceedings, where you have the right to an attorney, if you are 0 months old or 100 years old, you do not have access to attorney. So I represent children and I represent the elderly. And as complicated as it is, the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act, and all its addendums, thousands of pages, it's very, very complicated. Statute upon statute, modification, case law after case law. It's intense. And there is no way a foreign-born person who doesn't speak English, who may have a education equivalence of 4th grade in the U.S., could represent themselves pro se or pro per, Latin for by themselves. It's just not doable. I was part of a team that said everyone should have a lawyer. Lawyers make the system run better. Lawyers aren't going to racket it up. They're going to make it run better. More judges will make it run better. But for some reason, no one wants to fund more of us. I don't know why. I don't know why people don't like us lawyers, but it would do it a much fairer process. And so now, if you don't have a lawyer, your chances of staying in the country greatly diminish. If you don't have a lawyer, you likely won't show up for your hearing because guess what? You don't likely keep your your address up to date, and so that's an issue. And so what happens if you don't keep your address up to date is they send you a notice to the address you don't have on file, and then when you show up, they go, Angela Smith. Oh, Angela Smith's not here, and so then you get an order called in absentia. So you're put in, given a removal order. But guess what? ICE then find your real address when they go knock on your door to deport you. So it's very
Very interesting. How convenient.
very convenient. Very convenient. Yes, indeed.
So to support the therapists who are listening to this as a kind of the survival guide, if we have some clients that come in and they are wanting to get support in navigating the immigration process, what can that look like? Obviously, it's different state to state. We have listeners in all 50 states, so I'm sure that some of this is you'll need to look those things up. But how can therapists advise their clients to get the support they need to navigate this process?
Immigration attorneys can be expensive and they can also be pro bono. The problem with the assault on justice that has occurred with this administration is the federal grants and the federal programs that expanded access to justice were killed within the last 30 days by the Trump administration. So the largest was the Catholic Legal Immigration Network that had all 50 states covered. It also had guaranteed right to access to children. So over the last years, there was a lot of legal advocacy for at least kids who came over the border unaccompanied, for them to at least have lawyers, which I think is kind of the bare minimum. That, unfortunately, just this last week was taken off the table. The reason is to make it so hard that people self-deport, which does not happen. It just does not happen. It's not happened in the history of our country. People think it will, and so what has happened in my community, I can tell you, is that centers of community gathering, churches and other places have come together and fundraised to pay, community lawyers like myself the ability to represent these clients. We're a little unique at the law center that I run. Because when I started the law center about a year and a half ago, I wanted the chance to kind of do things a little differently. And I wanted to ensure that money wasn't an obstacle. So few things. We made it flat fee. We made it a payment plan. And we made sure non-banked clients had access. So it's a pain in the butt for me, but I take cash and we do Zelle with our bank. We work with our bank, Chase, to allow Zelle payments. My bookkeeper hates it, but it allows us to do it. The other thing is we do free screenings. We have access to the immigration system. We look up, everyone has an alien number, an A number. It's like a social security number. And we can immediately see where they are in the system. And we can let them know, hey, are you at risk? Do you have a final order of deportation? Because if you do, and you weren't aware of it, you may be on this target list for enforcement action. And that's how we need to let them know right away, hey, we need to make sure we file something right away. And people may have what we call immigration relief right at their disposal. Do they have a U.S. citizen child? Do they have a citizen spouse? What is their asylum claim? Can we file something? And so it's important. The other thing that we're telling people is to make a plan if they have children. If they should go back to the country of origin, what's going to happen to their U.S. citizen kids? Guardianship, power of attorney, what's the education plan? All these things that have to happen. Those are very, very important. These other kind of collateral issues that need to be tended to. I unfortunately had to do an adoption for a 3-month-old baby. Her mom was deported about 4 weeks ago, literally the third day of the Trump administration. And the adoption we're working on right now, unfortunately, one of the prospective adoptive parents has an immigration issue herself. And so we've got to fix that out. So it's going to be a tough 4 years. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's going to be longer than that, because unlike the last Trump one, I call it, I don't know if this now represents a new framework for the United States. And that's what scares me the most. Is what does this mean for us as a country? Because the movement of people is a thing the world's experience. We're not alone in dealing with political parties that are pushing back against migrants coming to the country and right-wing parties and all this other stuff. Everyone in the globe is experiencing this. So it's how we're going to deal with this as a country. And we've got to figure out who we are. We got to figure out how to talk to the other party. We need to figure out why messages doesn't resonate. And we've got to figure out unity. We can't be, it can't be us versus them. We've got to figure out how we can come together. That's got to be a big part of it. And so therapists, in kind of what I figure you all do, is kind of bridge divides. You guys are communication builders. And if anything, you guys are going to be what's necessary for us to heal this country, but also how we're going to be able to speak to each other, because we're not going to get through this, either the next 4 years or the next generation, without figuring out how to talk to one another.
Are you exhausted and overwhelmed by the constant change and chaos? You're not alone. When the world feels like it's crashing down, people look to therapists and leaders for support. But who's supporting you? The pressure can be isolating, and without the right guidance, burnout is just around the corner.
That's where Katie Vernoy comes in. With years of experience mentoring leaders and helping professionals, she's offering dedicated strategy sessions to help you find clarity, confidence, and a clear path forward. Whether you're struggling with burnout, career decisions, crisis management, or even navigating the ever-changing landscape of mental health care, Katie will help you create a plan that works for you.
Don't go through this alone. Visit evolvetotthriveconsulting.com/modern therapist to learn more.
What rights do migrants have? And I know that there's a variety of different levels to this. Some of the discussions that have been going around in the mental health community here in Los Angeles are not only for the undocumented workers, but also their family members, who might be the people that they're married to, who might be naturalized themselves, who might have the birthright citizenship, children between parents like this. I know many organizations are handing out things like red cards in order to inform people in their rights, but can you help us understand a little bit more? What rights do people have when it comes to being here, interacting with ICE, and what can they do about it?
Yeah, I've seen the red cards. When I was at ICE, I heard from folks that explained to me the Know Your Rights. You really need the red cards and the Know Your Rights to work if the ICE officers are going to abide by the Know Your Rights themselves. First, ICE warrants are civil warrants, meaning that when they knock on the door, or if you're in a confined space, you need to let them in. You have to give them permission or consent. It's not a criminal warrant. Unfortunately, even if the migrant knows that and says, I know my rights, I know I have to let you in, all too often there is not that understanding. ICE officers don't wear body cameras. And so you may find a situation where there's going to be a difference of opinion on whether or not there was the ability to state that, was there a consensual ability to get into the residence or the car. Unlike criminal procedure, there's no way to really contest the entry. So it's almost moot. And so I know it makes people feel better about the know your rights. What I say is know your status and find a lawyer and have your documents on you. So I'm doing a presentation next week to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here in Maryland. And I know they want to do know your rights and all this other stuff. But I just don't think that's as powerful as knowing your status and, knowing, having your documents and who to call. Because if people aren't going to respect that rule of law, it's not going to be worth anything. And there's no way to challenge it. And at the end of the day, if they have that final order, they're going to find a way to get you one way or the other. What you need to do is get in front of it. And you get in front of it by going to an immigration lawyer, the one you trust, and just figuring out what your status is. You got to figure out what your status is. You got to figure out where you are on the system. And that's very, very important. So go to a legal organization, go to an immigration attorney, just figure out where you are. So that's one of the rights. The other big right that you have, especially if you're an undocumented child, is you have a right to education irrespective of documentation status. The way that's playing out right now, unfortunately, is, ICE has made it known that sensitive locations are on the table for enforcement actions. So ICE has said they'll go to schools, they'll go to churches to pick up their targets. They won't do that usually because that's actually bad for the officers, but they will say it because it creates fear. So that's why kids don't go to school sometimes, and that's why parents are scared.
So the know your rights stuff, it sounds like, you're saying it's really not very helpful because ICE officers aren't really respecting that. And so keeping yourself out of their way and then finding out your status, making sure that you have representation if you need it, and having your documentation on you, that's kind of the best that you can do. And figuring out how do you continue to live your life and potentially have your kids get school and all those types of things while there's so much uncertainty. I mean, it seems really, really scary. Is there any other advice that you have that we can share with clients?
Well, you got to be proactive, not reactive. Don't wait for ICE to come. Get in front of it. Figure out where you are in your immigration case system and figure out how you can gain immigration relief and, get with a lawyer and figure out. Don't be afraid of ICE checking on the door. Know what your case is. Know what your chances are. All too often people ignore it. I can't tell you how many clients have come through my door in the last 2 weeks who have been here 10, 15 years and just ignored it. And now they're coming through it. Don't ignore it anymore. Don't ignore it anymore. You've got to figure it out. And guess what? About 60% of the time, I find a way for them to stay here. So it's possible. You just can't ignore it anymore. You just can't let it lie dormant. You got to get in front of it. Don't be reactive. Don't have a little red card. You got to pound the pavement. You got to go talk to somebody. You got to talk to an expert. You got to find a lawyer. You got to get a community member. You got to figure out how to pay for it. You've got to do the work. It's not as simple as don't come in the door. I know my rights. You got to do something with your rights. It's not a passive statement. It's an active statement. This is a foot battle, and you've got to take action.
Are there centralized places that you would recommend therapists go to continue to stay up on vetted resources and ongoing conversation around this?
Yes, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, or AILA, is a great resource. So it's AILA.org is a great resource. There's the Survivors of Tortures Network, and so that's a very good resource. I know that there's often a call for therapists potentially if they can do pro bono, because the evaluations for the asylum evaluations just to give the psychological evaluations, that could be around $1,000 sometimes from a therapist. You can give that pro bono. I mean, you can contribute too, and I can certainly pass that information along. Because we need experts. And depending on your credentials, you can weigh in. You'd have to come testify in immigration court, but you can do your part. And guess what? Everything has to go to trial under Trump. So evidence has to be given. So you have to support that this person has this real emotional reaction. They have experienced trauma. They do fear that they would be tortured and harmed if they returned to their country of origin. And so an expert has to testify to that they, under closed session, felt that way. And so there's reasons for you, like experts, to do that. So that's definitely something you guys can do to contribute to that. And offer migrants free access to mental health. Migrants in themselves don't think mental health is something that it's a stigma to get access to mental health still. And so, it's not something, they have very limited time. They're working 2 to 3 jobs, pounding. They're just trying to pay for lawyers. And so if, potentially having a group of people going to the same thing, there's lots of ways that you can think creatively with your resources and your skills to do some help.
Before we close up, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we cover here for our therapist audience?
Only that this is just the start of it. It's day 30 today. Today's day 30. And I've been telling my staff and my team is that I'm a big student of history, and sometimes we read these history books and we're like, God, how did they go through that? And sometimes you get to read history and sometimes you get to live through it. And I think we're all realizing we're living through history right now. And we did that with the pandemic, and we didn't know how we were going to do this. But we're at an inflection point of who we are as a country. And the one thing I will leave you is, when I talk to someone from Venezuela or from Cuba or from an African country that's been ruled by a dictator, and I ask about their country, when they talk about the spirit of their country, it's not the despot or the dictator. It's the country. It's the culture. So we're not Trump. We're not the people in power. America is not just these wackadoos at the White House. So remember that. Remember, we're more than that. But we have to work at it, and we can't be complacent. And America is an action, and my clients stand for that. They work day in and day out and do what I feel America is all about. And so the rest of us, the citizenry, and I'm definitely putting what I think into action. But the rest of us need to do the same as well. We can't just be armchair liberals if we're that. We can't just be armchair progressives if we're that. You've got to do something about it. And I think it's more than just voting nowadays. And guess what? I don't think some of us did that. So, but remember that we are more than just, the nation is more than just potentially who's in power. And seeing the spirit of people who have come from these countries that have had dictators and civil wars and strife, they still feel very proud to be Venezuelan, very proud to be Cuban, very proud to be, from the different countries. And I'm still proud to be an American. I'm just not happy with where we are, and I'm happy to be part of that change and happy to do something about it.
Where can people find out more information about you and your practice?
So they can go to marigoldlawcenter.com, and we are a law firm that is headquartered in both in downtown Los Angeles, where my younger brother anchors our office, and also here in Maryland, in Hyattsville, which is right outside the District of Columbia. And we chose marigold because it is a flower that is symbolic of family preservation and unity. And so, so that's all we're about. And so if you need help, please give us a call. Free consultations. We also have a big collaboration with health providers to give you free health screenings. We have providers to do adult literacy programs if you have to take the naturalization test. We also do lots of petitions for citizenship. We help you with the naturalization test. One of my favorite, the good part of this job too, is seeing new citizens born every month. I get to go and, get to go to cool places like Fort McHenry or Mount Vernon and, see people take the oath of citizenship, and it's fun. And so that's the good part of it. It's not all very bad and dreary. And so yeah, marigoldlawcenter.com, and we're happy to help folks. And my office speaks fluent bilingual Spanish, and we also have aid with an interpreter line for 50 other languages if you need it.
And we will happily include links to Andy's practice in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. Make sure that you follow us on our social media, join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist Group, to continue on with these conversations. And until next time, I'm Curt Wilhelm with Katie Vernoy and Andy Strait.
Want to make your private practice more profitable? Join the Profit First Academy for just $54 a month and start taking control of your finances today. Visit profitfirstfortherapists.com/academy to sign up.
Need guidance in these challenging times? Katie Vernoy is offering special strategy sessions to help you navigate your career. Don't go it alone. Get the support you need. Learn more at evolvetotthriveconsulting.com/modern therapist.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.